Good morning and welcome to the Book Flood podcast brought to you by goldenlibraries.com. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest this week is John Chrastka. He is Executive Director of EveryLibrary, the first nationwide political action committee for libraries, and of the EveryLibrary Institute, a nonprofit focused on research and training to stabilize and extend library funding. Since 2012, EveryLibrary has helped 130 library communities in the United States with ballot measures for funding, operations, and buildings, winning more than 85% and securing over $2.8 billion in funding. Its Fight for the First campaign platform provides community organizers with tools and knowledge to preserve freedom of access and the First Amendment in schools and public libraries. Welcome, John.
Tom, it is nice to be here today. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, of course. Let's start off by talking a little bit about your career progression. You're the executive director of both parts of EveryLibrary, and you may want to talk about what that means, but also how did you get here?
Sure. So EveryLibrary itself is a 501c4 organization. C4s are different than C3s. That's what the EveryLibrary Institute is. C4s are technically dark money super PACs. So we're we are able to raise and expend unlimited funds to advance our nefarious special interests, Tom. Our nefarious interests are libraries and the rights of readers to access books. The work that we do is all pro bono and for free. We're donor supported as an organization, so we have two things happening. One is donors from the library world, vendors, publishers, etc. And then we kind of have the Bernie Sanders model as well, where we ask Americans to support us if they believe in the work that we're doing, whether it's libraries on election day, anti-censorship, anti-discrimination. And we're very proud to be able to have about 400,000 people in our database who are people who have taken some sort of an action to support libraries or oppose bad legislation, oppose censorship, oppose discrimination in these campaigns. That work is complemented by the C3 side, which is a traditional C3s, 501c3s are charitable organizations. They're nonprofits. But we, on the EveryLibrary Institute side, do public policy, tax policy, and education policy. So we'll work with a state library association on crafting good legislation. This last year, we actually passed two new bills on the right to read called the Libraries for All Act, which looks at civil rights protections as a component of the right to read, and not just the First Amendment. Not to minimize that, of course, it's pretty important, but we also work with state library associations and local libraries on things like developing the ballot measures that they're going to go take out to the voters at the local level, other legislative initiatives that are in need of crafting and support. So that work on the C3 side, again, is donor supported. We have some wonderful people who are involved in that work, but also some grants, some philanthropy. Between the two organizations, we talk to the American public all the time about libraries and librarians, both in a proactive way as well as in a block and tackle on some of the bad things that are happening around the country. I got started with this because of a gap in how library advocacy and library activism was being done. But it's our 13th anniversary this week. We're recording the second week of September, right after Labor Day 2012. We put up an offer, as it were, to the library profession and to the American public and said, there has not been a political action committee for libraries. There's been a lot of membership associations which do great work, but they're limited. They're limited in how they can do that work by IRS code and regulation. What happens if we build a C4? What if we put together something that's focused on election day, that's focused on these matters of public policy exclusively? And we did a fundraising round. The public showed up, the library profession showed up and said yes, and then we got going right away on ballot measures in February of 2013. I came to this work because I had been working previously in education technology, in book publishing, and for the American Library Association. I'm not a librarian, Tom. I don't pretend to be a librarian. You don't want me working in a library. I don't like children very much. All the traditional things that librarians do. That's not my jam. But what I want to see is a world where that value system that I have about America, which includes the right to read, which includes a level playing field for kids, includes infrastructure and communities that support not only reading but also job creation, economic development, health and well-being. I'm a fan of libraries. I've been a library trustee myself in my own hometown. I've been a board member for state boards and commissions around libraries. And I would like to see a world that has that infrastructure in place. The pathway to get there was publishing and ed tech, and also support for librarians. And I'm glad to be able to do it now and share this with you on the 13th anniversary week.
Hmm. I think there's a part of me that says, well, shouldn't this be a librarian? But then I look back, I am a trained librarian, and I look
Mhm.
back at the training I had, and nothing that I was given in library school prepared me to do this. I
Yep.
think you sort of have to go another route to get there.
Well, we work on our training, coaching, and guidance across three kinds of literacies, and none of them are about how to help kids learn to read. We work on political literacy. Where does money come from? How's government structured? How do we move those conversations around policy and law forward? We work on financial literacy. So how do you structure debt? How do you put tax measures together? How do you make sure that the funding is there in order to do the good work and have nice humans employed in that place? And then we also work on legal literacy because a lot of what we're running into right now with book bans and censorship could be handled. Yes, there are huge political fights happening. There's massive issues around discrimination that are at the core of all these book bans and censorship fights. But if people understood how the Constitution was structured and legally how local library policies, local school district policies are the most local expression of the Constitution itself, I don't think we'd have these kind of problems.
Uh, it seems to those of us in library world, and obviously you're in that there has been a huge uptick in all of this in the last, well, really since COVID, probably the last couple of years.
Hmm.
Is that what you see on the ground as well?
Very much so. Our colleagues at Penn America do some extraordinary tracking. We help support the same Taslyn Magnuson. She's one of our EveryLibrary Institute fellows. Maintains an extraordinary database in real time of book bans and attempts to ban books. Um, the work that she does is not people don't report it to her exclusively. She's like a private detective for the right to read. She goes out and finds the issues, and the numbers are extraordinary. They're incredible. They're off the charts because we have states right now where censorship and discrimination are part of the law of the land. I mean, it's absurd to me, Tom. I mean, I'm in my early middle ages here. I have never seen anything like this. The idea that we are utilizing book bans again as a form of persecution, the fact that book bans are so focused on erasure of individuals and populations, that discrimination is at the heart of that. The fact that political actors have remembered that and are able to use it in 2021, 22, 23, 24. I mean, the numbers are off the charts. And each one of those campaigns that we've been working on through our fight for the first platform, um, it's a zip code, it's a school district, it's one small community of people who want to defend civil liberties, of course, but civil rights too. And in so many of those places, it's a civil society conversation because how do we want to how do we want to treat each other? What kind of town do we want to live in? I mean, the numbers are extraordinary, but each and every one of them harms not only populations but places.
What projects is every library working on right now?
So we have a few things. While we're here today in early September, one of our big ones is coming up during Banned Books Week, September 22 to 27. We have accidentally set up a new literary festival called EveryLibrary Live. We wanted to do some fun things during Banned Books Week, and we ended up having 26 panels with over 50 authors. We're talking to folks from the Julia Quinns and Jason Reynolds of the world to some new and emerging authors. We've got some panels on censorship and book bans as well, because it is Banned Books Week. But we're really looking to celebrate. I mean, Tom, all of the headlines right now for libraries are negative, and we have to change that. Americans are still reading. We know that through the pandemic, after the pandemic, through some of the research projects we've been working on, that almost 22% of all reading materials are sourced at a library. That's an extraordinary market share for reading that libraries have. Let's talk about the culture of reading. Let's talk about the joy of writing with these wonderful authors. Let's talk about the climate right now, because we have to get back to a better climate for this. Most Americans don't want to see censorship. It's a minority movement. It's under 10% of the population believe in it. And they need to be opposed, not just for the nobility of librarianship, but for the unconstitutional nature of things. So our Banned Books Week event is a big deal. We're trying to have those conversations where the entry point is, again, that culture of reading, that joy of reading, that story of writing, because we have to have these big policy conversations with people around the country. Fright for the First continues to be a huge effort for us. We have just onboarded our 105th local anti-censorship, anti-discrimination campaign. Those fights we're winning when we can help those local communities have their voice heard and help them with some of the organizing principles and ways to reach across the communities. We're working on a couple of research projects. I've got one that's kind of esoteric on congressional earmarks in libraries, because if we're not doing some wonky stuff right now, we need to be in that public policy space. There's a lot of work being done on November 5th as well for libraries on the ballot. Our core work back to the beginning or the end of 2012, when we first got started, was libraries on the ballot. And we've got some very interesting campaigns this year where the libraries need to pass their funding measures in order to stay open. And there are fights that are happening because book banners have been frustrated, censors have been thwarted, and they're going after the library's funding. So we're on the ground with those
if I can
campaigns.
step
Our next
step
big
in
move.
there.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that I'm hearing more and more is we can't actually do X, Y, and Z to you, so we'll just cut your funding. Is
Yes.
that also something that you're
It's
seeing?
really it's very interesting. There's and when I say interesting, Tom, I mean pernicious. The fact of the matter is that there are 5 different vectors about so when a book ban happens in a community, a challenge happens in a community that's organized, that's politicized, these 5 different conditions may or may not exist. And 2 of them are essentially anti-government and anti-public sector workforce. Now, there are anti-person campaigns in there as well. There's discrimination, there's bigotry involved, there's racism that comes in. There's also, in some places, a real significant attack on sex ed and the teaching of sex education. You take those vectors together, it explains why it's such a big problem nationally. But we know very clearly that there are places where the county commissioners or a special interest group of voters, anti-government people, anti-union people, anti-public sector workforce groups are using book bans as an excuse to discredit the institution and then go in and dismantle it. So I'd like to suggest that every campaign is about the right to read, but sometimes it's about the right of that community to have their library continue to exist.
I live out in California, and when this was just getting started, so we're California a little bit, and so we go, that can't possibly happen here.
Right.
Well, And then we discovered, oh, yes, it can.
Hmm.
And locally, our county supervisors had a whole thing um, about these exact sorts of issues, and we lost. Uh, and I don't think that that's all that uncommon. Do you see certain parts of the country is because we always think, well, it's the South, but what are you seeing in other places?
So while there are significant issues structurally, I mean, the government of the state of Florida, the state of Texas, the state of Oklahoma um, are, I mean, my goodness, the fellow who's currently the governor of the state of Louisiana ran, he was attorney general previously. He ran on a platform that included book bans and censorship. He ran on a platform that was, I mean, his first campaign rally was about setting up a website so that, that residents of Louisiana could report bad books. And he issued a report from his office as the Attorney General called Protecting Innocence. I mean, Tom, there's some big structural issues in certain states, and it's not just the South. We have problems in New Jersey. We have problems in Montana. We have problems in live free or die. You know, up in the Northeast. I mean, and California is too large not to have various demographics and various political perspectives, and certainly it's played out in California. I mean, it's the fifth largest economy in the world. Of course, there's going to be regional variations. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
as I like to say, we're a blue state, but some of our counties are as red as anything you're going to find anywhere.
yes. The situation that's going on right now, for example, in Huntington Beach, is very interesting. The Huntington Beach situation is they passed a local ordinance to allow for or to create a parent review board where citizens, everyday folks, which you want participating in government, are then empowered to do collection development and potentially override the First Amendment and impose local control in a way that might even be unconstitutional. That is alongside an effort that has now been shelved to privatize the library. And California has a little history of privatization of public libraries. Um, there's ballot measures that are being floated right now. Hopefully, they'll qualify for the ballot so that the local measure could override those bad decisions by the minority or by the majority of that city council. There's some great members of city council in Huntington Beach who protect the right to read and protect the citizenry's access to their public goods. But even a place like Huntington Beach, which, if I remember correctly, Jonathan Richman had some problems with back in the 70s, but even a place like Huntington Beach, where it's not Bakersfield, and yet Bakersfield had their problems. It's not Northern California, where there's not enough money going around. The impetus to cut taxes or keep taxes low has nothing to do with censorship, Tom. It's got everything to do with whether or not government should do things like buy gasoline for ambulances.
So, moving on a little bit, tell me about the house parties during Banned Book Week. This is a thing you're working on.
Yeah, yeah. So a good party. I mean, there's a colleague of mine, J.P. Picaro. At one point, he was the most famous librarian for a short window there. He had some good notoriety. JP ran for ALA president at one point on a platform of make it happen and party hard. And I was inspired by that. The make it happen part we do all the time. We're winning elections for libraries. We're helping to put books back on the shelf through our Fight for the First campaigns. We're helping to hold the line for school library jobs through our Save School Librarians initiatives. And once in a while, Tommy, you got to party hard. So the house party is an opportunity for people who care about the issues like we do, who look at what we're doing as being an effective organization. And if they can get together and have a couple cocktails or mocktails or whatever they're going to do and talk about some of these issues together and share in that Every Library Live event during Banned Books Week, do a little bit of a watch party, build some community, take some actions, and maybe raise a couple bucks for us too, because as I said before, we're 100% donor supported on that
Hmm.
political side. What a joy. What a real treat. I hope that folks around the country want to do this. It doesn't have to be focused on every library, but it should be focused on each and every library that's out there. Their hometown library, the ecosystem of libraries and reading, and I think most importantly, the people who work in libraries, who we try and support with ballot measures, new funding initiatives, and the authority under law to do their jobs.
So, speaking about authority under the law to do their jobs, what can you tell us about Project 2025? That seems to be getting
Oof.
a lot of traction.
Yeah, Project 2025 is an initiative by the Heritage Foundation, which is one of those groups that I mentioned earlier that's more anti-tax, anti-government, anti-civil society than they are around social movements. They've been around. Heritage Foundation's been around for an awfully long time. They are the think tank that fuels groups like ALEC, which is one of those. You might be familiar with ALEC. They are a dark money super PAC on a side that I find to be very nefarious, that produces legislation and shops it around the country so that you can do things like deregulate uh, plumbers and tradesmen, because somehow or another that would impede capitalism. Having plumbers and tradesmen who are regulated. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is designed to be a blueprint for the next Republican administration. We are a nonpartisan organization here at Every Library, but we are pro-library as well. The Heritage Foundation wants to do several things that we have problems with. We believe in a progressive tax policy that funds the common good. We believe in the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment as well in terms of equal protection. The Project 2025 framework is designed to deconstruct civil society. It looks at tax policy for municipalities and says that we are overtaxing ourselves, which means that public libraries are directly in the line of fire there. It looks to deconstruct the Department of Education. In fact, they want to end the Department of Education. They want to end programs that are as vital as Title I, which provide for equalization funding for schools that are disadvantaged and largely minority communities. They are, I mean, gosh, Tom, on the first page of Project 2025, they talk about how libraries, librarians, and authors should be criminalized, prosecuted for obscenity. They see the world in a way that is, it lacks a certain kind of neighborliness. It lacks a certain kind of compassion and empathy, but structurally, they're going to go after higher education to a point where colleges and universities will basically be diploma mills and just, back of the envelope, or back of a napkin credentialing. I don't want to live in that America. I am not interested in that America. I got this political action committee started almost 13 years ago now in order to support the infrastructure of civil society. So Project 2025 is something that we're trying to sound an alarm about for libraries in particular, because that's what we do all day, but also part of that broader ecosystem. It is fundamentally looking to deconstruct America. It uses very coded language to do that around populations and people as well. Tom, I don't want to live under that America.
Agreed. Uh, Given these uncertain times for libraries, both public libraries and school libraries, what kind of advice can you offer the librarian on the ground?
So there's libraries and librarians who are experiencing crises. If you're in the crisis, the biggest thing that you can do is get in touch with us, quite frankly, and other organizations that are credible about their ability to show up and support you. We do work on the ground right now to oppose censorship, to fight against bad ballot measures, to fight against legislation that would criminalize the work that you do and who you are. If you're in the middle of a crisis, we want to throw out a lifeline and invite you to take us up on our offer, because there are certain things that you can and you cannot do on public time as a public employee with public money. You need a bigger network. Professionally, it's more than just librarianship. Who else cares about that place that you call home? Who else cares about that school and that school community? Who else cares about the people you serve? So we can help you build those kinds of coalitions. But the biggest thing to do is to reach out and work on that kind of coalition building, those allies. Because if you are in a workplace that you cannot speak, you've been gagged, you've been somehow or another. I mean, you're under direct threat. Let's find the folks who can be your guard dogs. Let's put out a call to action like a bird dog would to say let's help out this library and these librarians. If you're in a place where you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, or it's fine, things are fine. I mean, there's 17,000 public libraries out there. There's thousands and thousands of school libraries out there. Most of them are not experiencing censorship directly or these attacks directly. It's happening a couple towns over. It's happening down the street. If you're in a position where you're looking to not mitigate a crisis, but inoculate yourself against problems, participating in these big public policy discussions, whether it's through your union, if you're in a state that has a unionized workforce, for education and for public libraries, whether it's through your professional associations, where you're talking more than just standards and practices or book awards, that you're actually talking about law and legislation and the structure of government. Participating with groups like us as well. How do we get ahead of it is to strengthen laws. How do we get ahead of it is to have a bigger coalition, again, of organizations that care about the same people you care about, same places that you call home. That work is an active voiced work. And Tom, if there's anything that we can do to help obviate the silos that librarians have placed themselves in or have been pigeonholed into, we will be able to inoculate against crises in those states.
And you talk about the silos, and that is a little bit the other part of this is a little bit librarians is a shrinking workforce, particularly
Yeah.
those who are licensed, credentialed, whatever you got, librarians. That's becoming smaller, and so often who you have there is someone who's a clerical staff person who's trying to do everything they can for sure, but uh, are certainly treated differently in the workforce.
In schools, the issues around the decline of certified, credentialed school librarians and the replacement by paraprofessionals and volunteers is happening unevenly, but where it's happening in certain states, it's happening very aggressively. We've seen some initiatives also over the last couple legislative cycles. In Montana, we helped turn around a effort on the part of the State Department of Education to eliminate the ratio of school librarians and counselors in state statute.
Hmm.
In Iowa, there was an initiative. I mean, the governor of Iowa in 2023 said that she had a 5-point plan to fix education, and the 5th point was to decertify school librarians. This issue around whether the degree matters, whether training matters, the combination platter of certified school librarians and classified staff to help run the place means that K-12 works well. In the states where there's ratios that are mandated, where there's a funding formula that's in place, we see the success of school library programs. On the public library side, there are, well, 2 things have happened. 3 things that have happened. One is that the aging of the workforce. I mentioned before that I'm in my early middle ages. There's been a lot of retirements, and those were coming. We knew the demographics of the workforce years before COVID. COVID accelerated retirements, and the COVID pressures combined with the post-COVID uncertainties have meant that we're not replacing the workforce at quite the same clip. You look at the 2018 PLS information from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the workforce, just the full FTE headcount's down in 2021, which is the most recent year from 2018. Now, there's some COVID noise in there, and there's hiring happening in other places now, but the long and the short of it is there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on budgets. There's a lot of pressure on library management, and maintaining a situation where there's a healthy mix of professional staff, classified staff, paraprofessional staff, staffing our public libraries. That's vital.
Uh, so finally, what are you reading right now?
Well, Tom, I'm in some very esoteric territory right now. I'm reading a wonderful book. Besides all the work I'm doing on Every Library Live, where I'm getting ahead of the author interviews, which is a tremendous volume that I'm doing. We've got some other guest hosts, which is a joy. But I'm reading a book on the right to petition, the right to the petition clause in the First Amendment. There's 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. There's the freedom of religion, freedom of and from religion. There is freedom of speech, freedom of the press. There is the right to petition and the freedom of assembly. And there's tremendous internal conflicts between the 5 freedoms. There always has been in America. How does my freedom of speech intersect with your right to petition? And what's a book ban or book challenge? I should say. What's a book challenge? It's the right to petition. I'm gonna tell my library, my school district, I don't like this. I have a grievance about this book. I think it's smut. I would like you to redress my grievances. I do think, Tom, that we've given in a certain respect, as a library community, more rights to the petitioner than is required by the Constitution. And I'm looking to find places where the weaponization of the First Amendment can be moderated. We've got actors in certain states, in certain places, who come in and say, I have a problem with this book. They don't have standing. They're not part of that community. They don't have kids in that school district. They say that they have objections to it, and because the library and the education community has said, yes, we will listen to your challenge for so long, and that, like, what happens when one individual supersedes or overrides the rights of everybody else to access that material? I'm trying to unwind that, Tom. And that book about the petition clause is helping me, I hope, think through that. On our nonprofit EveryLibrary Institute side, we work with law clinics, university law clinics every year. So we're going to be doing a big thing coming up on that issue with one of the law clinics this fall. And I got to at least be able to show up for the students with some intelligence.
Well, thank you for joining me today, John. And if listeners, if you want to support Every Library, we'll have a link in the show notes. Great organization, and you definitely do want to support them. They're doing great work for us. And if you want to support the Book Club podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps us on this end. Again, thank you for being here, John.
Tom, it's a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with your community about this.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you.